Welcome to week 6 of the BABOK 3 study group. We've worked through almost all of the knowledge areas up until now. This week is our last knowledge area, solution evaluation. I look forward to taking you through this particular knowledge area, and you'll see that I've broken it into 2 different videos. Okay, let's get started. I'll share my screen with you. Okay, fantastic. That's great. So solution evaluation, this is the 6th knowledge area. So what is this particular knowledge area all about? This is where we have tasks that assesses the performance of and the value delivered by a solution in the use by the enterprise, and to recommend removal of barriers or constraints that prevent the full realization of value. So you'll see that when we do this knowledge area, it's all about those performance measures that we define, analyze, and then actually go and recommend different solution options to the business. But let's just step back for a second. So as we've done in some of the other videos, the business analysis value spectrum gives us some context in terms of where specifically we're focusing. So with solution evaluation, we are now at the end of the process of a typical initiative where we are either looking at an operational system, doing an assessment of that, or we may actually be doing an assessment on a proof of concept or a prototype or even a beta or pilot release of a piece of software. So we are at the end of the spectrum, getting towards the actualization. So let's just have a look, first of all, what are the different tasks that's included in the solution evaluation knowledge area? So first of all, we'll look at measure solution performance. Then we'll look at analyze performance measures, assess solution limitations, assess enterprise limitations, and recommend actions to increase solution value. But let's first start with measure solution performance. So according to the BABOK guide, the purpose of this particular task is to define performance measures and use the data collected to evaluate the effectiveness of a solution in relation to the value that it brings. So the specific elements that you need to consider when we are performing this task is to define the performance solution measures, validate performance measures, and collect performance measures. So let's have a look at what each of these mean. Okay, so let's now first look at the first element, define performance solution measures. So there are a few different sources where you can go to start this process off, to try and find some of the more relevant and specific performance solution measures that will add value. And these could come from the goals of the enterprise or the division. It could come from business processes where the solution is being used. And it could also be influenced by third-party vendors, government legislation that could actually tell us what a solution has to be able to do and at what level of performance. Now, so once you've determined some places you could go to try and find some of the most relevant performance measures to measure your solution with, you need to also know that there are 2 distinct types of measures. You get the quantitative measures and the qualitative measures. So you may have heard about this before, but a quantitative measure is simply a type of measure that you can typically measure in terms of numerical or countable or some finite way. And these examples of this would be amounts, quantities, or rates, for example. Whereas a qualitative measure is more of a subjective measure. This is things like people's attitudes or their perceptions of a particular solution and how they feel about things. So it's not as tangible, however, it's still a very important measurement to keep an eye on. All right, so let's jump to the next element for this task. Validate performance measures. This is really just about the business analyst ensuring that the selected performance measures that you may have come up with are valid and is also agreed by all the different primary stakeholders that is part of your project or the particular owners of a certain solution that you're analyzing. Now, the third element around collecting performance measures is quite important. This is where you as a business analyst can potentially employ some basic statistical sampling concepts. And we'll run through those below. So first of all, we'll look at the sample size. So let's say, for example, you need to do an assessment of a particular solution and you need to assess a certain amount of data to get some data to analyze in terms of performance. This is where the sample size come in. It's unlikely that you'll be able to get access to all of the data, so you'll need to determine what would be a reasonable sample size to be able to reflect accurately what the performance of a solution is. Now, the sample size, to find what that optimum sample size is, will vary across different organizations and different situations. Some people might say a 10% sample size of the total set of data would be enough. Some people have more specific measures, such as 100 of something might be enough, but these are very much subjective in nature, and I would recommend that you do some research within the context of what you're working on to find that perfect sample size. And also keep in mind, if you are, for example, going to run a survey to a set of people, like, for example, you might choose to do a survey to customers about a particular solution. Keep in mind that only a certain percentage of those customers will reply back with some real data that you can use. So that needs to also be considered as part of your sample size. Then if we look at frequency and timing, consider whether these impact your context of sampling. Like, one example could be if you are working within a financial domain, for example, and you needed to get some data about the performance of transactions, transaction processing, you would probably avoid choosing your data around very high peaks only. You might have to keep an eye on the fact that certain times of the month within the financial domain will have higher processing demands than other times in the month. So you might either pick from multiple different periods of the month in terms of the data you extract, or you just need to be mindful of these fluctuations in transaction processing. And there would be other types of these seasonal-based considerations that may affect your actual data or your results. And then the last one to consider, your currency. This is really just saying the more recent the data is that you can use, the more valid the data will typically be. So try and avoid having all of your results performed on very old data, simply because it may not be as valid or accurate anymore. Okay, so that was the first task. Let's say we've now managed to define our solution measures and we are ready to analyze the data that we've received. So now let's look at the task, analyze performance measures. So the purpose, according to the BABOK guide, is to provide insights into the performance of a solution in relation to the value that it brings. The elements that we need to consider here: solution performance versus the desired value, risks, trends, accuracy, and performance variances. So let's have a look at the first element. So we've got solution performance versus desired value. Here what we're saying is that just because a solution performs well in one way doesn't mean it adds more value. So from a business perspective, just because your solution might be processing transactions really fast doesn't necessarily mean that we've got more sales coming through. So it's important to just make sure that what is the desired value that the business is looking for, and are we in fact measuring those particular aspects accurately. And just be mindful of the fact that, yes, certain parts might be working exceptionally well, but we need to check that it's actually delivering the value that we were hoping for. Now, the next element might be that new risks could be identified when performance values are analyzed. Like in the previous example, there may have been some, as part of your analysis of the data, you might realize, oh my goodness, the business is expecting this level of value, where although the system is performing well, we are actually not delivering that level of value. And the likelihood of that is quite low. So this might become a risk in terms of the future of the product or the solution. And you might have to raise it as a risk. But there could be a variety of different types of situations where you will start uncovering some risks with certain solutions. Trends. Now, this element is about noticing any trends in performance results. Whilst you consider the sample size, the timing, and the frequency to ensure that results are not skewed in any way. So this comes back to what I just said around the sample size and the timing of your sampling. Be mindful of those factors, because if you tend to find all of your data within a particular situation or a specific time of the month, your results might actually be skewed and not 100% accurate. And then the last element is in fact accuracy. So this is about simply ensuring that the performance measure results are accurate. Okay. Now, this particular element, performance variances, this is where you need to identify if there's any notable variances between the expected and the actual performance measure results. So everybody might have expected a linear kind of increase in sales, for example, but you might see by looking at the specific performance or the actual performance measures, the sales are actually a lot more erratic and it's not such a steady increase in sales. And you might see that there are gaps where we expected something to be more consistent. And this is where you'll say, okay, let's go have a look. Why in this particular week of the month did we have such a sharp decline in sales when we look at the system? And you might discover something there that's not working or something else that might be playing a part. So this is just another way that you look at your performance results and you consider what are those variances between actual and desired. All right, let's do a flash quiz. So we've looked at those two first tasks. Let's quickly do a few questions and see how much you can remember. So the first question, solution evaluation tasks can be performed on the solution components in varying stages of development. This includes prototypes and even beta releases. Is this true or false? 3, 2, 1. It's true. As I said right up front, when we looked at the business analysis value spectrum, any product that is either close to going into operational use or production, even prototypes and beta releases could actually be assessed for performance solution measures. Question 2, the only reason we measure solution performance is to determine that the technical performance is fit for purpose. Is this true or false? 3, 2, 1. False. Of course, it's not the only reason we look at solution performance. We would like to know whether the solution is delivering the business value that we've been expecting as well. Okay, so question 3. When we say the currency of a performance measure is an important consideration, we mean that the performance measure should ideally be based on more recent data as opposed to historic data. Is that true or false? 3, 2, 1. True. So we certainly have discussed this particular attribute where we would like the data to be as recent as possible. Okay. So over to you, as always. Remember to go raise some questions about this topic in the Facebook group. Do you have any examples of where you had to do some performance measure analysis or help define some performance measures? And anything else that you can think of that might be of benefit to others in terms of the exam. Great, guys. Thank you very much for that. I look forward to sharing the last part of this particular series of videos with you within a little while. Thank you.